This is Brother John.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You're online today, huh?
Yeah, Alhamdulillah, yeah. Big in San Jose.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no problem. Let's see here. One more minute, we'll give it. Okay, so good.
Hi, I wanted to ask if you know anything about the mass event that's going on.
It's in the masjid.
In the masjid?
Yeah.
Do you know anything about, I'm one of the hosts, so like, is it gonna be like,
All right, inshallah ta'ala, we'll begin. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم ينفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ينفعنا وزدنا علما كريم رب العالمين اللهم نسألك علما نافعا ورزقا واسعا وشفاء لكل داء آمين رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all of you. We're back for another session here. I'm going over the Seerah, the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We are in our sixth session here now, moving along, coming close to the end of the Meccan phase. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam spent 13 years in Mecca before migrating to Medina and spending another 10 years there. So we're coming close to the end of it. Next week we'll complete that Meccan phase. And then go over that inshallah ta'ala. So we're almost ending it now inshallah ta'ala. All right, so let's last week, just as a recap here, last week we spoke about that the year of sadness of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, losing his wife Khadija radiallahu anha and his uncle Abu Talib, and also being defeated, if you will, or humiliated and the town of Ta'if, where the Prophet ﷺ, journeyed over, like we said, 55 miles or so to the east, and did not accept his message, and also ran him out, chased him out of the town. And we talked about the story, how he was humiliated, he was bleeding from his feet, and then we talked about how hard that was for the Prophet ﷺ. Number one, to lose his wife, that you've been married to for, some say, 15 years or so, right? That was the marriage around that time. Well, actually, no, sorry, let me 25 years or so, sorry. Around 25, maybe 25 years, married to one single person, and going through all that hardship that the Prophet ﷺ went through, right? So that person is encountering all that you are encountering. You come home, you talk about how, no one accepted my message. That's the Prophet's, work day, right? Comes home and these people didn't humiliated me, this person threw this at me, I got chased out of this town, right? Someone that's there in the home, and all of us need someone in when you come home, or that's a good friend or a spouse, a good child, or someone there to not necessarily vent to, but to speak and talk to. And to lose that supporting pillar in his life, which sometimes we don't really talk about. We talk about the Prophet ﷺ as almost as a robot. He's a prophet, and we don't really talk about feelings too much. To lose that was very, very hard for him. And then we have his uncle, once again, the family member, and the protection against the people that are trying to harass him in Mecca. All right, so he lost that too. So we have those two things also. And so that's what we went over last week. And then, so now we're going to pick up of what happened. What did the Prophet ﷺ do as he's trying to get back into Mecca? And, after being, kicked out, if you will, or have to trying to, not necessarily be kicked out, but trying to find out where to go. And there was a person named there's a person, I'm forgetting his name right now, that accepted him into Mecca and said that, you know what, I will protect him. Mut'am ibn Adi, that's his name, Mut'am ibn Adi. He wasn't Muslim, but he said, you know what, I will protect him and I'll take him back into Mecca. And that's where the Prophet ﷺ was able to get back into Mecca and have protection. So I wanted to talk about something that there was Surah Yusuf that was revealed at this time. I like to connect the Seerah with the revelation of the Quran. I think it's kind of nice and it kind of puts things together. During this time, after this year of sadness, it's not 100% clear when the Surah Yusuf was, chapter number 12, when it was sent down, but a lot of them said that it was a little bit after this whole incident here, that this surah came down to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? And I'll ask you, all of you, alhamdulillah, study the Quran, you guys know Surah Yusuf, or maybe read it before, is that why would you think Surah Yusuf would be sent down during this time when the Prophet ﷺ is quite sad? No one accepted him. His wife passed away, uncle passed away. What is the significance, and what are some lessons that we could derive for why that surah was revealed at that time? What would anyone say? What would you say? So we have some people online or in person here. Anyone, any guess?
Confidence.
Sorry, say it?
To get confidence, to be confident in the outcomes and Allah's decree in making it happen, making it working out for you, even though you face adversity and yet you can succeed.
Right. Okay, that's good. Confidence, if it's with hardship, there's comes ease type, if you will. That Allah will support you, right? And we learn that from a lot of lessons there, because we know that Yusuf alayhi salam was basically forcefully taken away from his family and his land into another land, okay? Which we're going to see the Prophet will have to do that pretty soon, right? With hardship, there's ease. That taught him the lesson that, even though your family, Yusuf was his own brothers, right? Even though your family rejects you and maybe plots against you to kill you, right? And that's what the Quraysh was doing to the Prophet ﷺ, was actually plotting to kill him. We'll go into that a little bit later. Look at what happened to Yusuf alayhi salam, and look at that story, how he turned out to be. You might have to go to another land willfully or forcefully to live, to be successful, and victory and sovereignty over that land will come. That Yusuf alayhi salam had got to be the finance minister in Egypt, and that's kind of the main reason why, if I would ask anybody, how did Bani Israel, the children of Israel, right, how did they get to Egypt? They're in Palestine, right? All the previous prophets were in Palestine. So how did they get to Egypt? It was because of Yusuf, right? Because then Yaqub alayhi salam goes to visit his son in Egypt. And then what happens there? They end up living there. And that's how the children of Israel gets into Egypt. Unfortunately, the Pharaoh comes and enslaves them. But so here is this, that, you might have another nation that will go and be successful in another land, just as the Muslims will go to Medina and be successful and establish themselves in another land. So Surah Yusuf is, we could go over in 4 or 5 hours now about the benefits of Surah Yusuf and the lessons to learn from it. But at least in the, tied to what's going on in the Seerah, this is super significant here and understanding where that was sent down. Next thing we want to talk about is, let's make this a bit smaller, was talking about is the Isra and Mi'raj, the event of Isra and Mi'raj of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, I put right there that some of the, the exact date of when this actually happened is not necessarily have a firm consensus on it, but a lot of them say that it was between 12 to 16 months before the Prophet sallallahu made migration. Okay, so definitely after that, the year of sadness, and something, after that, if you will, sometime after that. And so the journey of Isra and Mi'raj has a lot of significant lessons in it, and we'll take some time to go over it. Number one, let's break down the terms here. Isra in Arabic means to journey, and more specifically to journey at nighttime, right? So the Arabs are very precise, that they have a term that when somebody would take a travel at nighttime, they use the word Isra. Okay, I don't even know if we have that word like in English. Somebody journeys at nighttime, other than a nighttime traveler, I think. I don't know. We don't really have a term for that. And then Mi'raj in Arabic means ascension, going up, all right? Uruj, to go high, if you will. And so that is talking about the ascension from Jerusalem or Quds up to the different skies above. Okay, we'll go into what do you mean by skies and where did the Prophet go. So Isra is talking about the night journey from Mecca to Jerusalem, Masjid Aqsa specifically, and then Mi'raj is going up from there up into the skies. Okay, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about this in Surah Isra, right, chapter number 17 in the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, A'udhu billahi min shaitanir rajim, Subhanalladhi asra bi abdihi laylan min al-masjid al-harami ila masjid aqsa alladhi barakna hawla. باركنا حوله يريه من آياتنا إنه هو السميع البصير. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, exalted is Allah, that took his servant, his abd, right? That's a prestigious title as being a servant of Allah, right? From Masjid Haram, from the Kaaba to Masjid Aqsa, right? Whose surroundings we have blessed. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that area in Masjid Aqsa, right, Palestine, Jerusalem, is a blessed area, right? There's certain barakah that's there, okay? Arguably, there's some, this is like the third, most sacred place for the Muslims on the earth, other than Mecca, then Medina, and then Masjid Aqsa. There's some hadith that if you pray there, you'll get 500 times the reward of praying anywhere else other than Mecca and Medina. Praying Mecca is 100,000 times more than anywhere, and then praying Medina is 1,000 times more. And there is a narration that praying in Masjid Aqsa is 100 times. 500 times. So there's a hadith that mentions that too, and there's a lot of hadith that mentions the significance of Jerusalem in general. Okay, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that there is barakah there. There's a reason. We all know about the Palestine and Israeli conflict, and we know a lot about that. We could go another once again 4-hour tangent about what's all happening there and what's right and what's wrong and so forth, but I'll skip that for today. Just want to go a little bit over about what is Masjid Aqsa. So this is kind of confusing. Most people, when they talk about Masjid Aqsa, they show this picture here, the Dome of the Rock, with this gold dome. And whether that's specifically, they do that purposely in the media, because this always looks nice, but Masjid Aqsa is actually the whole entire complex of where the Dome of the Rock is, and there's the masjid here. Now, a lot of people call this Masjid Aqsa, right? But it's actually called the Qibli Masjid al-Qibli, mean the Qibla, okay? You gotta think we all know, I didn't mention this, I should have mentioned this when we talked about, I think last week, we talked about how the prayer was. We talked the Muslims would pray twice a day, remember that? We talked about that? But we forgot about the direction. So I forgot to mention that the Muslims were praying to Masjid Aqsa. That was the first Qibla. Okay, obviously the Kaaba had idols in it and a lot of other things in there. So if the Muslim will pray to the Kaaba, it'll send the wrong message that they also worship these idols. People will be confused, if you will. Okay, and Masjid Aqsa, obviously, the lands of a lot of the prophets went there, and we could go on why that's significant there. Okay, so the whole compound, this big rectangle area, if you want to call it a rectangle, that has the Dome of the Rock. What is the Dome of the Rock? This is where the Prophet ascended and went up to the skies in the Mi'raj, okay? So there's a rock area there that's specific. It's said that that's where the area where the Prophet went up. So they built that as that structure to identify that. The Masjid Aqsa either is exactly the whole compound there that they're mentioning here, even though there's a smaller masjid now there. You have to understand throughout history, this place has been destroyed, built up, destroyed. The Romans came in, of course, the Jews had their quote unquote empire there, the Temple of Solomon, Sulaiman alayhi salam. Sulaiman alayhi salam, this is where he had his kingdom. Right? I thought you guys know about the Queen Sheba, and he brought the jinns brought the throne over to him. This is the area that happened there. Okay. Obviously it looked much different than it looks now. Okay. Of course, the Jews have this thing called the Wailing Wall, which is over here, where the Moroccan gate is, and they do their worship and other things that are there. But the whole compound is understood as being where Sulaiman alayhi salam either had his empire, and there's also Masjid Aqsa. The Jews call this Temple Mount, or meaning the Temple of Sulaiman. They call it the word temple, where he had his empire. And this is where, and I won't go too much on a tangent again, but this is where the Jews want to rebuild their empire. That's the reason why the whole Israeli conflict is really happening, Palestine conflict, because they want to take over this area and build the empire back again, and their Messiah will come, which we know that's going to be the Dajjal, and they'll welcome him thinking that that's their Messiah, and they want to have a empire back here on earth again, just like Sulaiman alayhi salam and the Jews had at that one time. So they want to do it again. I want to bring that back, and they want to come and rise up as a nation, right? Literally, they know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took that away from them, from their disobedience to their prophets. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed another group of people, and that we know that's us as Muslims, and they lost that for how many troubles they gave to Musa alayhi salam and many of the prophets that came after that. So that's it. So yeah, so that Masjid Aqsa is the whole thing. So if you see like, Masjid Aqsa is nice and clean, and we don't attack it, that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about here, this is where you see some of the images in Ramadan, where they go in the masjid and the soldiers come in, the Israeli soldiers come in and they, shoot up places. And unfortunately, that is where that's happening. I'd like to show you this picture here to make sure that, look how beautiful it is and so forth, which is not, not the right area. All right, so this is where the Prophet meant that he led the other prophets in prayer somewhere around here, whatever that structure was, right? On this night, it's mentioned that he was by the Kaaba. Two different narrations, that he was in his house. Some say that he was sitting by the Kaaba at nighttime and he was sleeping, and Jibreel alayhi salam comes to him and tells him, wake up, and this is also the story that I mentioned earlier, that this is also narrated where that they split his chest, washed his heart with Zamzam water, put it in a golden basin, they filled it with Iman, right? And then put it back into his in his chest and sewed it up. That same story we kind of mentioned, is this happened when he was a small boy. Remember that? When he was out in the desert. So there's two narrations, either talking about the same incident, or talking about two different times this happened. And we talk about Anas ibn Malik, he mentions that he saw the incisions on the Prophet's chest, right? That, almost like a surgery was done, if you will. Okay. So Jibreel Islam comes, brings the famous animal called the Barak, right? Had wings, right? Almost like maybe like a smaller than a horse, bigger than a mule, that they said. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or mule or donkey, the Prophet gets on it. The Barak actually starts moving, and then Jibreel says, it's a prophet that's on you, and other prophets have written this animal before. So there's a notion that other prophets either had an Isra Miraj type incident before, or went up, or that it was some other time that they went on. There's not much information on that, but Jibreel tells them that the other prophets have gone on it. So the journey to Masjid Aqsa, we just went over there, okay, and it's mentioned that the prophets, that's a good point right here. Was a masjid actually standing at the time of Isra? Now you have to understand the Romans were ruling this area here, right? During this time, there was no masjid there. They destroyed everything. The kingdom of Sulaiman alayhi salam, they broke it down and they invaded and they took that over. And there's some narration that they made this a trash dump just to show insult to the Jews of what how much we think about your religion and so forth. Okay. And so there was mention that there's really nothing that was there at the time. Definitely not this dome there, definitely not the masjid there. So either that when the Prophet ﷺ got there, he just led them in this area called Masjid Aqsa, but there was no like a real building as a masjid, or that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it that it was a vision that there's a masjid there and he saw it, and all the prophets came and he led the prophets in prayer. Okay, so there's two different ways that you could understand that. All the prophets coming back and being behind them, obviously they can't be in their real bodies because they passed away so long time ago. So either Allah brought them back just for that moment and then took them back, or however that was, it happened that there, and that's what's mentioned there.
Just real quick, historically before this, there were a lot, like before the Romans were there, a lot of buildings. There was like bigger buildings there and like prayer centers there as well, like for the Jews at the time.
Yeah.
Was it there was already like a holy site before that?
Yeah. So you have the kingdom of Solomon, go back to Sulaiman alayhi salam. So that's where that would be.
Okay.
I would really dig into the history of what happened in between. This year, this one came, this one conquered, this one conquered. I don't know.
Was it like flat when the prophet was there, or was there like? That's
a great question. Some narration mentioned that there was a trash dump that they made it into it, whether it's hilly or the leftover, some type of, pillars or something. You even see there's all these pillars here also that's still standing there, whether that was from the original structure so many years ago. Allahu Alam, I don't know, right? So yeah, that's very interesting to understand that. Wait a question.
Oh yeah, so you mentioned that the other prophets were ascended, right? Similar to Isra and Miraj. So my question is in Surah Maryam, it mentions like Idris alayhi salam was actually ascended, or وَرَفَعْنَاهُ مَكَانًا عَلِيًّا, which is like, so is that referring to that incident, like a similar incident, or is it just like or is it saying he's in a high place in Jannah?
Yeah.
After his death. Right?
Very good, very good. So there's we're going a little bit of a tangent here. So
Right.
brother Salim's asking about Idris alayhi salam in the verse in Surah Maryam that we raised him up into makanim aliyah, like a high maqam. Okay,
Yeah.
so some said that there's a narration that mentioned that that Idris, that he will pass away up in the like going up towards the skies, if you will. And people are saying like, how is that going to happen? And so there's a narration that Allah raised him up, and his soul was taken up in one of the, and you'll see in the Isra Mi'raj, he's on the 4th level, I believe.
Yeah.
Of the skies here. So it could have been that's what it's kind of referring to. They raised him up here, and then that's actually where he was taken, if you will. Yeah. There's not much about Idris in the Quran. This is all like narrations outside hadith and so forth.
Yeah, because what's it called? Yeah, just even in the I remember he talked about this. I don't mean to jump on a tangent. We'll get back to this. He says that like the Prophet ﷺ had the dream when he went for Isra and Mi'raj that he saw all the prophets like in Jannah.
Not in Jannah. So
I mean, like he saw the prophets, like he saw Yusuf alayhi salam, he saw
in this area.
Yeah, he was ascended, and they were each on like different levels.
Yeah,
Isa alayhi salam,
we're gonna go over that. Yeah. That's true. So yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Was that Qibla towards Masjid al-Aqsa before or after the Isra?
Before the Isra. Yeah. It doesn't change until Medina.
There, but the Rasul was facing that way. Was there anything there? Why was he facing?
Oh, it's just like the land itself. So there's not like a Kaaba there. It wasn't like a pillar or something. Just that area, that land is Masjid al-Aqsa, which is like, even though it's not physically there, just to point that way, if you will, right? So it's even mentioned that the Prophet loved the Kaaba so much, obviously growing up and seeing and understanding that Ibrahim alayhi salam built it, that he would pray in front of the Kaaba but facing Palestine, so therefore he's kind of praying to both. Yeah, so you have that of the love, and then see later on that it gets switched in Medina. That's the point there. I was going to say something. Forgot the last thing you mentioned there. Oh yeah, so there's a narration where the Prophet, when he led the prophets in prayer, he said that I saw Isa alayhi salam, and he was very fair skinned. And he said I saw Ibrahim alayhi salam, and he looked just like me, like he had similar features as me, right? And so so therefore he was physically, seeing the prophets behind him, which is and I did say that there is 124,000 prophets that were sent down. And then 300 something messengers. So that's a lot of people that would be, and a lot of prophets, subhanAllah. So however that was, the main point of that is that the Prophet was leading them as a sign of significance, as you say, the leader of the prophets, or one of the most honored of the prophets, if you will. They all have the same message, but honor differs, if you will, in terms of how great they did and the different trials they went over. That's what we understand that. So led the prophets in prayer, there he goes. This and so forth, so that he tied the Buraq there, it's mentioned, prayed, and then they went up to that Dome of the Rock area, which wasn't there obviously at that time, and that's where he ascended and went up into the skies. Okay, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the Mi'raj in Surah Najm. So the Isra is in Surah Isra, and Surah Najm talks about the Mi'raj, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I'm jumping to a couple of the verses that speak about it. عِنْدَهُ سِدْرَةُ الْمُنْتَهَى عندها جنة المأوى إذ يغشى سدرة ما يغشى ما زاغ البصر وما طغى لقد رأى من آيات ربه الكبرى. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that going up to the skies, he went to this low tree, this big tree that's at the end, okay, and near the garden of refuge where there covered the low tree, which it covered, how big it was, how great and grand it was. The sight, the Prophet did not swerve, like he didn't, like what he saw was true. That's basically what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said. And he certainly saw the greatest signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We'll see very different ayahs like this in the Quran where Allah talks about Ibrahim saw the signs of Allah. Musa alayhi salam saw the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that could be indicating something that's similar. Jibril alayhi salam takes the Prophet up to the skies. And I want you really to focus on this word skies. So they're not heavens, okay? The samawat and then jannat, okay? There's a different word from the word sama, right? And the word Jannah. We all know Jannah, right? We're all trying to get there, inshallah ta'ala. Right? So there's a difference between the two. So in the hadith that talks about the Isra and Mi'raj, it talks about Allah raised him up to the different skies. Now, what are the skies? Now, the skies are mentioned in multiple places in the Quran. Sab'a samawat, right? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Sab'a samawat tibaqa, sort of mulk, that we created 7 skies in order, if you're in arrangement, tabaqa, right, if you will, okay? So they are like realms that are above us. Okay, so like, how do you even understand that? So some scholars say that when you look up into space, or look up into the sky, that is all the sky that we're in right now. We're called, the lowest earth, if you will, down in the lowest sky. And then there's ones above us. Some scholars say that you could see that. The second one, the third one, the fourth one. We can't see it, our eyes don't go that far, obviously. But if you would look in a telescope or something, then it's all that's out there in what we call space. And obviously, we don't even know what space where it ends at, right? It's so massive. But that's all where the 7 are at. Obviously, there's barriers somewhere between them. It's might be invisible or something like that. I don't know about wormholes and stuff like that. I'm not going to get into all those different things if they're, you could warp into the next one. But it's interesting because when the Prophet goes through each sky, there is an angel that says, "Who are you? Who are you taking?" And then you're allowed to go into it. You know what I mean? And it's almost like there's doors. It's the abawab. There's a door to enter into this next sky, and the next sky above, and the next sky above, right? So there's there's a notion of that, if you will. So, like I said, 2 opinions. Number one is that whatever we all see right now in space, if we look at all these galaxies, is all the one. And there's another one above us, and there's 7 more above us, if you will. Whatever they are, they must be great and amazing, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the best of creators. So we'll just take that, if you will. Okay. So the Prophet ﷺ and Jibreel alayhi salam goes up into the skies. The first sky they enter is Adam alayhi salam is sitting there. Okay. And then Jibreel alayhi salam says to the Prophet ﷺ, "This is your father." Obviously, we all know that. We all came from Adam alayhi salam. Greet him. The Prophet greeted him. And Adam alayhi salam returned his greeting and said, "Welcome, O my son. What a good son you are." And then there's the next guys as they go up, there's a little bit of dialogue sometimes between the prophets, sometimes there's not. So the second one, there's Yahya and Zachariah. Obviously, Yahya is the son of Zachariah, right? So that makes father and son are on the same level. Next one goes up is Yusuf alayhi salam. We just talked about Yusuf alayhi salam. The fourth one is Idris, and that's where we just talked about with brother Salim's question. And then number 5 is Harun, the brother of Musa alayhi salam. And then number 6 is Musa alayhi salam. It's mentioned when the Prophet got to Musa alayhi salam, he saw the Prophet and then started crying. Okay. And it was asked, the Prophet asked about the reason. And Musa alayhi salam answered by saying that, "I'm weeping because I'm witnessing a man sent after me, that was able to lead more people to paradise than he did himself." Right? So all prophets want to save their people. Right? So if they don't do that, it bothers them, which is good. Right? And so you've seen the Prophet that you did a great, not like he's envying the Prophet, obviously the Prophet's not envying each other, but that you led so much more than I did. I wish I would have done a better job. That's what he's trying to say. Right? But obviously, if you read the story about Musa alayhi salam and his people, he had a very hard time with his people. They just didn't listen. They're just very, very, very tough people to deal with. Right? So anyhow, he sees them there. Then he goes into the 7th sky, and that is where he meets Ibrahim alayhi salam. Okay? As mentioned that he's reclining on the Bayt al-Ma'mur. Bayt al-Ma'mur is like a Kaaba in the 7th sky. And he's leaning there, and it's mentioned that 70,000 angels. The Arabs will all use the word 70,000 just to mean a lot, like tons. Okay, we say the word tons. Okay, so not necessarily if you count it, it would be exactly 70,000 that enter it every day, and they make tawaf and they never leave. So every day another 70,000 come. So imagine how many angels are making tawaf around this Bayt al-Ma'mur and just praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's all they do all day long. Okay, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has enough praise, right? It's not like he needs it for us, so we need to do that just out of our own respect, right, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And said some say that's one of the narrations mentioned that it's over the Kaaba. So when we make tawaf around the Kaaba, above it, and however high that you have to go and wherever that is also where the angels are doing the same exact thing. So we're mimicking what the angels are doing. And every time you mimic an angel, you're probably doing something good. Right? That's a good thing to do. And so that's something, if you think about when you're making tawaf, you're doing what the angels are doing and memorize it. making mention of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, praising him. The Prophet ﷺ and Jibreel reaches the Sidr al-Muntaha. Sidr is a tree. Muntaha means the very end, right? That is it. You can't go any further. Okay, this big tree. That's it. Like a big, almost like a dead end, right? Except that no one goes except there except whoever has permission, and that is where Jibreel says, "I do not have permission to go any further, but you have got permission. So go ahead. I can't even do it as being an angel, right? How great Jibreel alayhi salam is." Okay? But the Prophet ﷺ was able to have that honor to go ahead and go forward to talk to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's mentioned that when he went to talk to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not like he saw Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because all he said that all I saw was a light that was in front of me. And it's mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a thing called like a hijab, not the hijab women wear, but a hijab literally in Arabic means barrier. And he said the barrier or the hijab in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is this nur, is this light. You can think of it as energy if you want, right? And it was just so bright that you couldn't even look at it at all. So through there, right, or wherever that image was, is when they had the conversation. And all we know is about that conversation is only one part of it, and that is about the part of commanding him and his ummah to pray 5 times a day. Okay? So the Prophet gets permission to go forward. The order of salah was given. It was originally 50 times a day. Okay, 50 times a day. If you do the math, that's around 28 minutes, every 28 minutes. We'll have salah, every half hour. Okay, and if you, are you okay? Yeah, that's a big, so for 28 minutes, right? And so that's almost every half hour you have a salah, and you wouldn't be able to do much work or do anything else. Your life would be what? Would be salah. So it's a big indication how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted us as a creation. It would be just to worship him. That's it, right? And even that wouldn't be enough, that what he deserves, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? But that's what it was. Next the Prophet ﷺ goes down, and as he goes down to the different skies, Musa alayhi salam stops him again. What level is Musa alayhi salam on again? 6, very good. Everyone was kind of scared, right? So he was 6, right? Ibrahim was on the 7th. So he went down at least one sky down. Musa alayhi salam has probably the most experience dealing with what? A large ummah, group of people. Okay, so if anyone's going to have advice to the Prophet ﷺ, how do you deal with this large congregation, this big group of people you have? It will be Musa alayhi salam. So Musa alayhi salam stops him and said, what was the conversation about? If I was there, I would love to know what was the conversation about. Everyone wants to know, right? And so the Prophet said, I've been ordered to pray 50 times a day. The Prophet, not like he's gullible, but he's saying hey, that's the order. I listen and I obey. So I'm just going to go back down and tell my people. Musa alayhi salam said, I have experience dealing with people that your ummah will not be able to do that. They won't be able to do that. Go back and ask for a reduction. So it's mentioned that happened 3 to 4 times. It went down to 25, then went down to 10, and then went down to 15. I think there's a narration 25, 15, 10, 5 or so. I have to look that up, but it was a couple of times. The Prophet went back and then met Musa alayhi salam and said, no, 25 is not, they won't be able to do it. Go back again. 10, he said, go back again. The Prophet came back and said, okay, I got it down to 5. Musa alayhi salam said what? Your ummah will not be able to do that. That's 5 is too much. Okay. Remember, he dealt with Bani Israel, right? The children of Israel, where he will tell them to go right and they'll go left. He'll tell them to stand up, they'll sit down, right? When worship Allah, they worship a golden calf. Right? He knows that people are very hard to discipline people. And the Prophet said that basically, I'm just too embarrassed to go in front of my Lord again and ask for another reduction. How am I going to do this again? I already did so much. I feel too embarrassed to ask again. So the Prophet ﷺ goes down and then advises his ummah that they'll be praying 5 times a day. But there is a narration, alhamdulillah, we're glad that there is one there, where it's mentioned that Anas ibn Malik narrates that on the night of Isra, when 50 prayers were made obligatory upon the Prophet ﷺ, then it was decreased down to 5. It was called out, a voice called out. It said, "O Muhammad, indeed my word does not change. These 5 prayers will be recorded as 50. So every time you pray 5 times a day, you're getting recorded what the original command was about, which is 50 times. SubhanAllah, right? We know much extra credit we could get in this world, we'll take it. Allah is Kareem, He is generous, and alhamdulillah, He's given us, that reward 50, which is more of an emphasis to pray. Make sure we do our prayer 5 times a day, because we're getting that same type of reward, and how beneficial that is. Somebody, no one.
Well, I was just gonna comment on the fact that it goes to show how much authority that the prophets have, that he was able to the prophet is telling him to do this. That okay, Prophet Musa alayhi salam is telling the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, go back and reduce it, go back and ask for a reduction.
Yeah. And also they care for each other, right?
Yeah.
Remember, he was crying because the Prophet sallallahu outdone him in terms of followers, but now there's no envy there. He's saying I love you so much, but no, you're almost not going to do it. Just go back and let him reduce it down, right? And so alhamdulillah, we got our 5 daily prayers. You guys all know what the 5 daily prayers are. I don't put it here, and I'll go to a little bit of a side note. It's mentioned that after this, Jibreel alayhi salam came down to the Prophet sallallahu and showed him when the prayer times are. Remember, they only pray twice a day, so the 5 is where do you put the other 3? So Jibreel alayhi salam went and he prayed with the Prophet sallallahu and showed him this is the beginning of Fajr, and then he came the next day and showed him what the end of Fajr was. So he came down in 2 days. The first day was the beginning up to the time of the prayers, and the second day he came to show him when the end of the time of the prayers are. Now there's a little more of a little side note now, is that there was a little bit of different narrations of the time of when Dhuhr ends and when Asr begins, okay? And those who follow the Hanafi school know this, there's an issue here, because zenith made right above your head and has moved over a little bit. We don't pray when the sun's right above our head. It has to move over. He prayed when your shadow was one length. He prayed Asr when the shadow was one length. Okay, if you stand and your shadow is one length, then that is when he prayed Asr. The next day, right, he prayed Asr when he prayed Dhuhr, when the shadow was one length, and prayed Asr when the shadow was 2 lengths. Okay, and so here there's a different narration understanding. When does Asr start? When 1 length or when there's 2 lengths? So Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, a famous imam, and you could say the owner of the Hanafi school, if you will, said that Asr prayer is when there's 2 lengths. So if you ever have your prayer app, and you can go to your settings and you can change it to Hanafi standards time, and it will make your Asr time later. And if you put it back to Shafi, Maliki, or Hanbali, the other schools, it will make it earlier. There's only a rare amount of masjids here that pray the Hanafi Asr time. IOK is probably the only one that I really know of around here. And if you go there, their prayer Asr is at 6:30 or 6 o'clock or something like that. Right? Now, they don't believe that's when Asr comes. That's when the Jama'ah comes in, but it comes in later for them. That's when it's 2 length. Now, there's a good point on that for why the Hanafis do that, is that if you pray when your shadow is 2 length, then you know that you're correct 100%, right? But if you pray when it's 1 length, there's a possibility that is when Asr ends, but then Dhuhr ends, but Asr hasn't begun yet. So you could be praying when Asr hasn't started yet, if you want to go with that opinion, okay? But so that's why if you take the second opinion and pray later, you're always going to be right. You're never going to be wrong. So that's how one of the points where the Hanafis have their Asr time later than they do the regular. Or confuse the heck out of you, just pray whatever your app says and you'll be okay, inshallah. Don't worry. Okay. So we got the prayer times, and then Jibreel alayhi salam taught them that. Okay. On the way back down, there's a lot of events I mentioned on the way back down when the Prophet came back down and what happened. One of it is made that the Prophet saw, and I don't have it there. I don't have it here. Is that the Prophet saw the angel Malik, the one who is the guardian of the hellfire. So he saw the hellfire also, and he said, "Who is that angel there? He's not smiling. He's not happy at night." He's like, "No, he's the guardian of the hell gate, and he has not smiled ever since he took that position." Right? There has to be a guardian in front of the gate, because if someone is in Jahannam, they'll be trying to get out, if you will, right? So he saw that. So he saw the people of Jahannam also. He saw different punishments of the people who did interest, who did this and did that. So he saw that also when he was coming down. So imagine seeing that, what type of experience that would be. Also, when he was coming down, he saw the people, the Quraysh's caravans that were going up to Palestine on the way back. So when he came back and the Quraysh said, "Oh, this guy's a madman. He's saying that last night he went all the way to Palestine and he came back." How is that possible? right? If you have a bullet train, you won't be able to do that. So how is that possible? Look how much nonsense he's saying. And then the Prophet started saying, well, I could describe how your caravans look and who was on there. And when they came back into the city, it was exactly how the Prophet mentioned. And he also mentioned that, when I came back, I stopped at this house and I drank water from that pot. Look at that pot. You see the lid that's still open. And they went and they saw the lid that was still open. It's also mentioned that they went to Abu Bakr, who was obviously the best friend of the Prophet, and went to him and say, hey, your sahib, your friend, your companion is speaking absolute nonsense. He's saying that he went to Palestine last night and he came back, right? What do you think about that, right? You would agree that he's gone mad pretty much. Abu Bakr says that what I believe in something that's much greater than that there's a Lord that we can't see, that he's the one that created us. And whatever he tells you is true. And that's where he got the title of As-Siddiq, the truth verifier. That's nearly what the word Siddiq means. And that's why they call Abu Bakr Siddiq. Abu Bakr Siddiq, you probably heard this before. If you haven't, then you're learning it now. And that's where he got that title, okay? And being a Siddiq, because when they try to tell him, look at you, or the Prophet, look what you've done, he says, no, I 100% believe him. Abu Bakr didn't have to go to the Prophet and said, hey, did you say that? That's crazy. Like, you really went to Palestine? Are you like, and you came back the same night? And he didn't care to go to the Prophet and verify the news. He's like, if he said it, it's true. Like, why would he even doubt him for? You know what I mean? And so that's how it shows you that how much iman Abu Bakr subhanAllah had with Prophet said. All right. So that is the Isra and Mi'raj. Any question about Isra and Mi'raj in general? Went over some of the main details. There's a lot of other fine details in it, but this is kind of the main points of it. Next thing that what happens is that, remember we talked about how the Prophet went to Ta'if, remember last week, and he was kicked out. And then we talked about this morning, or we just started the class, we said that Mut'im ibn Adi, one of the non-Muslims in Mecca, took the Prophet in and said, you know what, he's under my protection. If you harm him, then you're gonna have problems with my tribe, right? So I give him protection. I don't believe in him, I'm not Muslim, but I protect him, okay? Here the Prophet is knowing now that, that might end anytime soon. Right? So I need to find somebody to believe in Islam and also take me in as their leader. So the Prophet ﷺ, what he would do, sorry for the font, it's quite small here, that anytime, we all mentioned that anytime Hajj would come, he would meet with the different tribes in Minna and say, hey, this is Islam, you should follow it, etc. Majority of the time he gets rejected. All the time he gets rejected. And you go to the different tribes. They went to one tribe, Bani Amr, and they believed in him. They said, we believe that you're a prophet, right? We'll take that in. But if we make you our leader, when we have victory, would you put us in charge afterwards? Like we want to, it's good, we use you, but we want to be in some position also. And he says that only will happen if Allah subhanahu wants it. You know what I mean? Otherwise, this is not about leadership. You join me, we win, and then we put you up there, and this is, no. And they said, we can't take that. And so they rejected him. Then he went to one tribe, the Khazraj and the Aus tribe, from the place of Yathrib. Yathrib is the name of the city of Medina before it became the name of Medina. Okay, and so the Prophet ﷺ goes to this tribe here, to the point that he had Abu Bakr and Ali with him, and they didn't even know what this tribe was, who they were. They're so unknown. There wasn't really a powerful tribe at all. Okay, and there was these small amount of people, 6 people that were there that said, the Prophet talked to them, tell them about the message of Islam, and guess what? They said, we accept it, right? This no-name tribe, right? That they really didn't know about too much. They didn't even understand who their followers were, what their lineage was, but they accepted the message. And the people of Yathrib here are divided into 3 main groups. There's Arab tribes, the 2 main Arab tribes, Aus with Khazraj, and then there's the Jewish tribes that are there. What are Jewish tribes doing in Yathrib, in Medina? Well, it's going to be Medina pretty soon. Okay. Why are they there for? Because they got exodus from Palestine. The Romans came in and were basically persecuting the Jews, and the Jews had to just get out, go to different areas. Okay, and so one of the areas they went to was Medina or Yathrib, because they knew that there was another prophet that would come from there, from their books and from their scholars. They knew that the next prophet will come from this area where there's palm trees in the desert. There wasn't palm trees anywhere, just in Saudi Arabia in general, present-day Saudi Arabia, but it was only a couple places, and Medina was one of them. So that's why they were waiting there. They were just living there until this next Messiah comes and will lead them to greatness, as we mentioned earlier. Okay? And so what happened is that the Jews will tell that these two tribes here, Aus and Khazraj, when our Messiah comes, we're going to kick you out. We're going to take over your city. They made it kind of blunt, right? What their intentions were. Okay, and that we're going to do this, and we're just waiting for this to happen. Okay? And so these are the main groups that were there. So this 6 people, 4 was from Khazraj, 2 was from Aus. They accepted the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Why do they do that for? Okay, if I ask you that, why this small tribe? Out of all the other tribes that are there, these 6 people all of a sudden say, you know what, yeah, that's a good message. I think we're going to accept it. I think, yeah, you are a true prophet. Out of all the tribes and everything, why did they accept that for?
They needed leadership at the time because they were very divided in Yom Kippur. They needed someone that was like, someone to really like bring everyone together.
Awesome. Very good point there. Another one is that I have the point right there that they had the Jews that were there and they knew about scripture. Even though they're Arabs and they're pagans, they're all about their idols and stuff like that. So they don't have no connection to prophets and understand who Musa alayhi salam was and who Ibrahim alayhi salam was. They don't know that, but they knew about the stories from the Jews, always bragging and talking about their lineage, who they were and who they're the chosen people and blah blah blah. So they had some understanding that, hey, this is the next prophet. Guess what? If we jump on him first, then guess what? This might be we beat the Jews out. You know what I mean? So that's also another thing. So they knew about a prophet to come, even though they might not have believed in it. That also helped. But what Amir is mentioning here is super significant. And this is a great hadith here that's mentioned here. I know it's quite small there. Where it's narrated by Aisha radiallahu anha. Aisha radiallahu anha mentioned in Sahih Bukhari that she said that the day of Bu'ath, what is Bu'ath? Bu'ath was a day that was a big war. Okay. Unfortunately, it's a bad example, but I'll say it anyhow. Like 9/11, right? Everyone remembers 9/11, unfortunately, right? But everyone kind of remembers. So she's saying the same thing. Like when the day of Bu'ath, when Bu'ath came, that day of Bu'ath was that she said there was a big fight between Aus and Khazraj, the 2 Arab tribes. They all just had beef and they were killing their leaders and they were fighting for so many years. But this was the last big war that they had, and a lot of their leaders got killed and a lot of the people got killed. Okay? So they say the day of Bu'ath was brought about by Allah for the good of the messenger, for the good of his messenger, for the good of the Prophet ﷺ. How can that be? So that when Allah's Messenger ﷺ reached Medina, reached Yathrib, right, the tribes of Medina had already divided and their chiefs have been killed and wounded. So Allah brought about the battle for the good of his Messenger ﷺ in order that they would embrace him. Okay. Because if you have people who are just bickering and fighting all the time, they don't care if you're blue, green, yellow. If you could help us, then we'll take it. You know what I mean? It's almost like money. You can help me make money, then I don't care who you are, what ethnicity, I'll take you, right? That's how people work, right? But here, these people are at the point where, you know what? Our fathers died, our uncles dying, our children are getting killed. Like, we're tired of this nonsense. If you're a person of peace and you preach a really good message, we need unity, then guess what? We'll take you in, right? And we believe in you. And also they believed in the message. And I always say that here, like especially here in America, you see like the structure really breaking down, unfortunately, right? We're not like the greatest like nation that we used to be. Education, we used to be like way up here. Now we're like number 16 or 17 in the world now. We had all this power, and even our political system, people are kind of fed up with this Republican Democratic thing. They don't know who's speaking the truth. They're getting, burnt on both sides anymore. People are just looking for some type of like, who could speak the truth and bring good to the country. They're just like desperate now. We don't care what color you're wearing. Just be honest with us and help us. We got inflation. We got so many other problems going on, right? And I think this might be great for us as Islam, as Muslims, that we could, represent a message where people are like, that is something I never heard before. And you people are much different than what I've heard from other people. So this could be a great opportunity, kind of like the Day of Bu'ath type thing, if you will, where it brings a great opportunity where people are just looking, who's speaking the truth, and we're tired. And I'll say this, and it might be a bit controversial, where people also, like, you see sometimes when you talk to certain Christians, not all the Christians, but sometimes they're a little bit fed up with like what they hear about in Christianity. Like they can't understand exactly what that message is. The Trinity, they never really understood it. And, it's just like really confusing to them. They maybe never felt, the yaqeen, certainty in it, And so they're also looking like, hey, I didn't know this whole message here. This makes so much more sense to me. And the thing is, if we never present it, they'll be stuck in the cycle. You know what I mean? And so, so the errors, how bad it sounds, the errors and faults and deceiving of other people is a great opportunity for us as Muslims, because alhamdulillah, we have this one statement, we just don't change, and this is what the truth is, and this is who we are, inshallah ta'ala, we can represent that. Okay. So these people, they want to accept the Prophet ﷺ because what? He's much different than what's going on there. So that happened in the year of 11. Also in the year of 11 is the marriage of Aisha radiallahu anha to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we mentioned the Prophet was married already. Remember last week, who was he married to? Anyone remember? His wife starts with an S. Sauda, all right? Sauda, radiallahu anha she's the first wife of the Prophet that Prophet married her after the death of Khadija radiallahu anha. Okay, Aisha radiallahu anha, a little bit more controversial, it's more for the non-Muslims, but we'll talk about that in a bit here. The Prophet mentioned in the hadith that the Prophet had a vision that he is marrying Aisha radiallahu anha. Now Aisha radiallahu anha is the daughter of Abu Bakr, okay, radiallahu anhu. Now, back in those days, if you had a really good friend, they loved to marry in between families or between friends to make the friends a little bit closer, right? They also, the person really well, right? You don't want to marry some random family, you don't know who they are, and you get surprises afterwards. Even when you know them, sometimes you get surprises, but anyhow, that's just marriage in general. But so here that the love for his friend Abu Bakr and vice versa, right? They would want to have some type of intermarriage because that will make the bonds a lot closer. Another thing, if you know that your friend was a prophet of Allah, I don't care who my daughter is, I would want him to marry that person. I don't know about you. That would make perfect sense to me. Help me out in the hereafter, in this world, and everything else. So, right, for us, it's very clear. Now, the problem that comes to it is this: when it comes to the age of who Aisha radiallahu anha, what she was at that time. So some narrations mention that she was 6 years old when the Prophet married her and didn't consummate the marriage until she was 9. Okay, which here in America, obviously, that just kind of makes everyone flip upside down, and we can't really understand that. And that's just not how marriage works with girls at this age. They're not mature, and they won't understand marriage. They'll be taken advantage of, and all this stuff that we kind of understand. People might say, if you will. We'll go with this number here, number 1, and I'll talk about some other stuff in a bit. If marrying a girl that the Prophet was, you would say that would be probably around 51 years old at that time. Okay, number 1, it was a vision of the Prophet had, and the visions of the prophets are revelation. They're not this like random thoughts, if you will. And so here that Allah subhanahu is guiding the Prophet to do this. So marrying a girl at this age, like I said, it could be problematic, as even as Muslims, we kind of like, I didn't know that type of feeling you get in your mind. Now that could be problematic for some individuals. Now the point is that if we take our customs today we have here in America in 2023 and try to implement it on a civilization 1400 years ago, that's always never going to work. We can look at how people lived back then and how the bathrooms. Look at the bathroom system. It was just an open area. People used to walk out. Even Europeans at the time too, right? And there's no toilets. You go in that area. See that area over there? That's where people go, the bathroom, and you squat down and you do your thing. For us here, we're never going to go to the bathroom ever. I'd rather just soil myself, because why would I go out there and everyone's going to see me? But that's how bathrooms were back then. We would think it was very awkward. All of us here would be very uncomfortable with that. The way that people dressed, whether with something similar to this and turbans and stuff, we would say, I don't know how I could wear that. They don't even have sandals or hot sun. So anytime you take your custom and try to apply it to someone else, another civilization, especially so long ago, it's always going to be problematic. Now, if girls were getting married at that time in that civilization, who are us to say that that's right or wrong? If anything that we could judge it by is that, what did the people say about that over there? Now, guess what? People hated the Prophet ﷺ at that time, did they? The Quraysh, right? They hated it. They're always looking for the faults of the Prophet ﷺ, right? He's a poet, he's a madman, he's a sorcerer, he's a magician, he's possessed with a jinn, right? If they knew that the Prophet was married to someone that was 6 years old, do you think Abu Lahab and Abu Jahl and all the enemies of Islam will make sure that's front page news? They would spread that. Look at this guy is doing this and this, right? They will try to make him look so bad. But guess what? You know how much narrations we have that when the enemies of Islam, what they said about this? 0. No one said anything. Abu Lahab and Abu Jahl and all the enemies of Islam, right, didn't think that was normal, like something that was strange, something that was weird, something that we need to raise a flag about. If anybody would say something, it would have been them. But since we have no reports of them going in the streets and trying to do this and do that, so that was something that was understood at that time. It's even mentioned that Aisha radiallahu anha was actually engaged to someone else before she married the Prophet. Okay, you're like, why do they even do that at that age? How can they even do that? I don't know. Go live at that time. You probably say, oh, well, that's what people kind of did. I don't know, right? But sometimes I know this.
Sorry, Brother John here. There's also one thing you have to consider is what was custom in other cultures at that time. I mean, that's why what I find so hypocritical when now a lot of people, Christians, say, oh, I mean, astaghfirullah, I almost don't want to use the word in combination with the prophets or some is pedophile, right? That's the word they're using. I mean, you have to see what other cultures did in the 7th century, of our times, right? 7th century. I mean, in Europe or in other places, this was probably very common practice.
Very good. That's an excellent point. Yeah.
To now bring that up and turn it against the prophet is hypocritical.
Yeah, very true. That's true. That's if you do it.
Maybe even the Pope probably married one that was 3 years old or what,
Right. I mean, yeah, that's a good point. I think if you do a survey of how people were marrying at that time, you talk about 600 AD. Or 650 or so, that you can see what was the age, and even in Europe, it's quite different. I mean, some of us, if you go back to your grandparents and ask them, your grandma, ask them how old were you? I know my great grandma was 12, I think, when she got married, and she had like 50 kids or something. I don't know, like 14 or something like that, right? That's how they were able to have so much kids, because they start that early and they keep on going. Every year there's another kid that pops out, and it just but for them it was like, what do you mean? 12 years old is like she's puberty now. She's a woman now. It's not like back in the day, like, she had to do 4 years of college, they get a master's degree, and then we think about it. Yeah. And now women get married at the age of 30 now, right? And that becomes a little bit problematic too. So there's someone in between. But for them, it was quite normal. You were going to say something, Sam?
Yeah, I was just going to say, aside from these norms, if we do believe she was married at 9 years old, then we also have to believe that she loved the Prophet ﷺ, because both those points come from the same sources.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, that's an excellent point there. Good.
Also, like, the people who have, even as Muslims, nobody should be ashamed of this, because there's a bunch of reasons why. Like, the people who have a problem with this and ask, why did she get married at such a young age, they're actually being very hypocritical, because number one is obviously what's being promoted on the children in public schools nowadays, right? LGBT agenda, and it's like, aren't they too young to know about this? Yeah. And then number two, it's like, even in history, King Richard married a 7-year-old, and historians talk about how great the marriage was for France and uniting Europe.
There you go.
I have a problem with that.
Right.
So it's like they're hypocrites when they do that. So we should flip it on them, the non-Muslims.
And that marriage is a very subjective thing. If here in America, at least California, you can't get married until you're 18. I think Nevada is 16.
Japan, it's 13. Right? Age of consent. Yeah.
Okay, so you want to ask, like, how do you come up with those numbers? It's kind of hard, and maybe take an average, how are girls mature at that age, and what is a mature girl? And so this is very subjective type of certain things, right? But we understand, like, we want to make sure the girl is mature, and make sure that, she's not taken advantage of. And that's why we have this concept of wali in marriages, right? That the woman has a guardian that makes sure that proves the marriage, and we don't have the kind of fuddy-duddy things that are kind of going on. So, but one thing I want to mention, that if you go back to hadith criticism, and they look at some hadith here and they find like some weakness in some of these hadith that mention these ages, there is talk that it could have been that she was more of the age around 15 and got consummated when she was 18. There was a narration that she was born 4 years before the Prophet became a prophet, right? So the Prophet they got married in 11, so 4 plus 11, what are you going to get? 15, right? So there's some narration that would make much more sense. And the problem is that with age, and here the Arabs at that time, they didn't really look after their birthdays. That wasn't a big thing for them. You don't get a birth certificate. Here that's very norm for us. And every year we have people have birthday celebrations and stuff like that. They didn't have that. So if you ask somebody, how old are you? They're like I don't know, that wasn't a significant thing for them. They don't really keep their age, and they understand, how old they are, what year they were born, because they didn't have a calendar, number one. So, right? So there was no even calendar. They know when the Prophet became a prophet because of the year of the elephant, because the elephants, we talked about it, came and tried to destroy the Kaaba, right? It's just that's what they called it. They didn't call it 1571 or something like that. They called it the year of the elephant. That's what they didn't have no name for it. No, there's no date. So when it comes a lot of times with these numbers here, the Arabs are really, and they change their calendar sometimes too. And so it's very hard to kind of really pinpoint how much it is. But if you want to go with the lowest number, then we heard the the rebuttals to some of that, and inshallah, hopefully that makes you feel a little better if anyone had an issue with that. And if you want to go to 15, 18, I think more regular Americans will probably accept some of that to extent.
There's also another fact I found out from Sheikh Uthman. He mentions that in Jewish law, a man can marry a 3-year-old girl.
Okay, maybe,
yeah,
I
so
don't know.
in other religions, it's like that.
Yeah,
The Bible
yeah.
mentions Isaac married Rebecca when she was like 12 or 13.
Interesting.
Yeah, so there's lots of even
I think you'll probably find really
there's
interesting.
lots of things you can find.
Yeah. So anyhow, but nonetheless, one of the main wisdoms of this, of Islamically, why marrying someone at this age would helps is that when she was so young, she was able to. She lived in the house of the Prophet, obviously, so she witnessed an enormous amount of things. So that helped her as she being so young that she lived for a very long time to narrate all these narrations that we were able to have in our books of hadith now, because Aisha radiallahu anha know like how the Prophet slept because she's watching him in the house, right? How did he eat? Who came to visit? What happened to this time when someone came to the house and said this is the Prophet? We have so many narrations where she's narrating that someone knocked on the door and they said this is the Prophet. He visited this way, he slept this way, he ate this way, right? He got up for prayer to Hajj in this way. Like if she was passed away when she was like 50 or 60 something that's so much if she got married much later, we won't have these narrations. And so there's a lot of wisdom in that we have this because she was quite young, was able to live longer and narrate it in the books, and people were able to preserve it. Okay. Good. Next I want to mention though, so we have these 6 people, only 6. They go back to Yathrib. They're the Muslims, right? In Yathrib now. The Prophet ﷺ sends one person, right? Imagine like, why not like 50? One person to go back with these 6, and that is this person named Mus'ab ibn Umair. If you ever want to look up know about a Sahaba or read up on a Sahaba, who they were, at least that one person you should know amongst the greats of Ali and Abu Bakr and Umar Uthman is Mus'ab ibn Umair. Right? Just put him in a Google search and you'll see some beautiful stories come up. It's an amazing individual. Okay, Mus'ab ibn Umair, number one, that he was from a very wealthy family in Mecca. Okay, whatever he wore, whatever scent that he had, everyone mimicked it. Okay, because he had the latest styles and he smelled the greatest, and that's what you do. He left all that when he became Muslim. He goes, this dunya stuff, I don't want this stuff anymore. And he started dressing this normal, not like rags or anything like this, right? And his mom got quite upset. I'm kind of summarizing the story here. Chained him to the pillars of the house. I said, if you do not change your religion and go back to our religion and leave this religion of Islam, I will not eat. I will fast. I will keep on fasting. Nobody wants to see their mom get, tortured or go through hardship. Nobody wants to do that. But obviously he doesn't want to leave Islam. And he had to watch his mom go through this and kind of suffer. And then he finally escaped from his house, right? And be able to stay with the Prophet ﷺ, right? And hide from the people of the town, right? He did all this and much other great stories that he had. The Prophet ﷺ picked him to go to Yathrib. Now, imagine how great of a, speaker he was to explain Islam. To go to Yathrib and tell people about Islam. So when he went there and it's mentioned that almost every single house in Yathrib, which later we call Medina, had a Muslim in their house, embraced Islam from his efforts. Okay. Back in those days, if you got the tribe leader to become Muslim, guess what? Everyone else in the tribe becomes Muslim. That's the way people just like, okay, uncle's Muslim now, and we become a Muslim now. Okay, the grandfather becomes Muslim. Everyone's like, all right, the whole town of Ground Grove is now Muslim now. That's kind of how they worked, okay? And so there's a great story about Usayd ibn Hudayr. He was, of course, non-Muslim in Yathrib. He was one of their warriors, one of their leaders. And he didn't like it that he was coming in, Mus'ab ibn Umair, they come and teaching and spreading this religion of Islam and causing people to change their religion. Once again, same story, and causing all this corruption. So he came with his lance and his spear, and came up to Mus'ab ibn Umair and said, if you don't stop this right now, I'm just gonna kill you. I'm gonna fight you on what you're doing here. You're splitting up families. Mus'ab ibn Umair looks him in his face and says, okay, I'll give you a deal. Number one, you sit down with me, hear what I have to say. If you like it, you embrace it. Number two, if you don't like it, then do whatever you came here to do. They say, come and kill me. Go ahead, let's go, let's fight. So Said said, okay, that's a good deal. Let me sit down. Okay. So sits down at the dawah table here, right? Sits down with them. At the end of the speech, guess what? Becomes Muslim. Alhamdulillah, right? Or else we won't be talking about him very much if that went the other way, right? Imagine how much confidence that he has to have in what he's about to preach to make that statement, right? And that is what I want to tell everyone here, that when we talk about Islam, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know if it's going to work. I don't know if that person is going to like it. It's that you should say, like, this is like, I have gold in my hand. If I show people gold, they're either going to steal it from me or they're going to take it from me. Because who's going to turn that away, right? Or this diamonds in my hand, whatever you want to use, that, whatever analogy. That is the idea when we talk about, like, should I talk to someone about Islam or should I shy away? I don't want to bring up religion. It's going to be kind of awkward. No, it's just that you're presenting gold. Either the person doesn't like gold and they're going to walk away from it, right? Or they don't realize that's gold in your hand, or they're going to find out soon. And that's the kind of mentality he has. And that was able to convert him. And when he did that, many people became Muslim, right? Imagine overnight, the whole Yathrib changed because of the dawah that he did. Okay, that's one of our favorite signs for why Islam that we have. This organization ICNA has. We love Jesus because we're Muslim. Anytime non-Muslims see that sign, they get super lost. What the heck does that even mean? And that's why they come and they end up talking to you. So we have shirts like this. Maybe we should bring it. You guys could wear it, inshallah ta'ala, to your work next morning, right? See what happens there. Anyhow, so this, this is like, but this, alhamdulillah, this talking about Islam should be something that we should shy away from. Okay, with all the great stories, also some other conversations that he had. Okay, the next year comes. Remember, this was year 11. We only have 6 people. So year 11, 6 people here, right? So Mus'ab bin Umair goes, does his da'wah, right? Spreads the message of Islam, alhamdulillah. The next year is the first pledge of Aqaba. It's called the first pledge of Aqaba, okay? I got the other programs in the masjid. Yeah, no. And so here, 12 people now come. A lot of you guys are saying, like, hey, that's not a really good percentage. It's a 100% increase if you think about it, from 6 to 12, right? If you look at it that way, you see that's great. Your sales went up 100%, right? If it was a sales, you would get happy. When you look at the number, you're like, only 12, that's not like a great amount of people. For the Prophet ﷺ, this was amazing, okay? So the thing is, though, 6 of them were the ones that came from, or 5 of them were the ones that came from the previous year. So there's only 7 new people that came. Okay? But this is the only people that came from Hajj. That means the ones that were Muslim in Yathrib. Okay? Only people that came to Hajj. So this time of the year, in the 12th year, when people come to Hajj, the Prophet met with the tribes of Yathrib again, Aus and Khazraj, in this place called Aqaba. It's a valley in Mina. You guys ever did Hajj before? The tent city, Mina, there's an area in the small area there, it's called Aqaba. That's where the big Jamarat, one of the Jamarats are there, where you stone. It's called the Jamarat Aqaba, that's what they call it. Today now it's a one big structure, it's kind of hard to see, but anyhow. But this is where the Aus and Khazraj tribe would settle in Mina. Back in the day when they used to make Hajj, it's almost like today, where they have like the Westerners, the Canadians, the Americans, and the UK are one area, and then African countries another area, and these people are in no areas. So just like when people would come and do Hajj back during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they will stay in Mina, but the tribes will stay in different areas where they're known for, if you will. So when you go and visit, these are the tribes from the south, the north, east, etc. So the Aus and Khazraj will go in this place called Aqaba, this valley there. The Prophet ﷺ talked to them. There was 12 of them there. They accepted it. And they did the pledge called the pledge of Nisa, the pledge of a woman. Okay, why is it called that for? Where these 12 people made a pledge where they're not going to worship no one other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're not going to steal, not going to commit adultery, and they're not going to kill their children. Why would he put that in there? Customs are different, right? So that was their custom. Yeah, alhamdulillah, we don't have much people killing our children here in America, and that's a good thing. So now we're looking at them as weird, right? So, but that's something that was a thing during that time. So this is what they agreed on. They became Muslim. It's called the Pledge of Nisa meaning that the pledge of a woman, because they're women, obviously, back in those days, they didn't really go out for war and defend the tribes. So here, there was no point here about defending the Prophet ﷺ. That, if someone harms you, then guess what? Our tribe's going to come out and defend you. Right now, we're like, yeah, we're Muslim, but we're not ready to commit to have our tribe and lose their life because of you yet, if you will, okay? The Prophet didn't necessarily want that. He just said, this is what the commitment is. One thing I want to think about, I want you guys to focus on, a lot of times you see how we have shahadas here, people to become Muslim, right? And so there's always this little, not a debate, discussion within the scholars, that when someone becomes Muslim, what do they have to testify? That there's no worship other than Allah, and the Prophet is the messenger. But there's anything else they have to say about that? Do they have to say that Jesus is not a prophet, that Moses is a prophet, right? Do they have to do anything else? You look here, the Prophet, what does he add here? That they become like, they're not going to worship anyone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Of course, they believe him as a prophet. So the second part of the Shahada is not there, but it's understood. But what? Also that they don't steal and they don't commit adultery and zina, right? So there's like character that's also built there, right? So not that, we want you to become Muslim, mashallah, we do your Shahada here, but also we want you to be be a Muslim too, right? So we don't want you to go to the bar tomorrow, or we don't want you to do this, we don't want you to do that, right? So it's also, the Prophet also put these kind of refinements in there. That, that also, become a Muslim, that you also handle yourself in a certain way. Sometimes for non-Muslims or people are new Muslims, they come with a certain, background, and Allah subhanahu will guide them and help them get through there. But it's one thing that they also should focus on. And that might take some time. We work with them with that, inshallah.
I was just gonna say, it makes sense because, oftentimes the Muslims, they might not know anything about Islam other than the Shahada, like the concept of Tawheed. So it's like, they would have to understand that, like, okay, we can't eat pork, we can't steal, obviously, we can't do these things, and it's like, not having like extramarital or premarital relationships. So it's like, it made sense.
And it's more our fault as whether leaders or people in the community that we don't necessarily, teach people as well they do. So it's responsibility on both sides. I'll put it that way, if you will. Okay. I'm going to stop here. We have 5 minutes. I think Dr. Siddiqui has a class. I'm assuming right afterwards. But I had one more. No, I could put one more slide in there, I guess. So that's all that's remaining. Okay. The following year, year 13, is the second pledge of Aqaba. Now the Aus and Khazraj comes back again, right? From the next year of Hajj. Look how long this takes, right? We have, 6 people, 11th year. 12th year we have 12. There's only 7 new people that came. Third year, there's 75 come now. Now the numbers are much more increasing now, right? But the Prophet has a lot of patience. It's not, hey guys, come on, let's go. Let's get me out of Mecca. Let's start a new nation. Let's go. 3 years waiting for the applications to go through and to people to accept and all that stuff. Has to have a lot of patience with it while he's being tormented in Mecca and people are trying to kill him. Right? Imagine that's all going through there. 13th year, 75 Muslims come from Yathrib, we call Medina, right? They take this pledge. Now this is more the full pledge now, that they'll listen and to obey in all circumstances of the Prophet. He is now your leader. He says, jump, you jump, okay? To spend in plenty and well in Socrates, so give zakat, basically there's a form of, sadaqah in the form of charity. Do good and forbid evil, obviously quite general. And here's the main one here, to defend me, and in case I seek your help, so if I need you to come and defend me, you're going to take your sword out and you're going to stand in front of me, or you're going to fight with me. Don't bar me from anything you debar yourself. Defend me from wherever you defend yourself and your spouse and your children. Right? Same thing as you protect your wife and your kids, you'll do the same thing for me also. Okay. So now it's like a bigger commitment now. It's like, well, this is pretty serious now. We might lose our life if we take you in as our leader. Okay. The Jews are not going to like it. Right. So we go back and we have a prophet now. I think the Jews are going to like it. So they know they're going to have some trouble back in Yathrib, and no one else is going to like it too. Okay. And then they said, we heard your message. That's good. But what is it in for us? Like, you want us to do this and do that and do that. Now they're not trying to be disrespectful, but they're asking a legit question. You know what the Prophet answers? It says that for you, you'll get Jannah. You'll get to go to Jannah. This will be your prize. What do you think they said about that? They said, we accept that. That would be great, right? SubhanAllah. Right? Today, tell somebody that, they're like, all right, we got some kind of throw a car in there, let's do something else, you know what I mean? Like new clothes or something, give me a prayer rug at least or something, right? Right here, like get Jannah, how much they believed in that, the yaqeen, that is what we want, right? And they believe that. That's amazing for people that were Muslim for maybe 1 or 2 years, or even months maybe. Their iman level is different, all right? And I'd love to go into some characteristics of who the Ansar was. They're going to call the Ansar Muslim, Yathrib are called the Ansar. Well, we'll talk about them next week. I'm running out of time here, right? Then them themselves told the Prophet, we want you to come to Yathrib and be our leader. The Prophet said, no, I want to be your leader and take me into your town, right? They said, no, we want you to come. You're being suffered here. You're getting persecuted. Come and our lands here, we will protect you, you'll become the next leader, if you will. Now they are asking for the Prophet to do so. The Prophet says, okay, and there's some other, well, next week I'll better explain this, and I'm running out of time once again. And so what happened, that Muslims started making a small migration secretly out of Mecca to Medina, to Yathrib, right? They couldn't go all at once because the Quraysh will never have that. They don't want their people to leave, okay? So they started making migrations, so and so, and the Prophet ﷺ would go later on, and then next week we'll talk about the hijrah and how he makes migration, what happens, and so forth, if you will. Okay. Questions or comments up to this point here? Good. It's a little warm in here, huh?
I heard there was like a numerologist that made up the age of Aisha, that like, oh, because it's 6 and 9, those are special numbers or something. But the real numbers is like she was 15 and then it was consummated at 17. That's what I heard.
Well,
but
I know about numerology, but the Hadith in Bukhari actually says the word 6 and 7 though. So it wasn't like someone made that up. It's in there. It's in the narration. It's in the Hadith narration itself. But I told you about the 15 and 18 from other that people try to calculate. From the other narrations mentioned that she was born 4 years before he became a prophet. So then they do the math, and that's where they get the 15 and 18 from. There's no Hadith that says 15 and 18. They're just deriving it from other points of view.
I have a couple questions actually. One was so when it was referring to Hajj, throughout like today, that's referring to the Hajj that was like taking place normally during that time. Like the one that's
So they do have the same concept. They'll make tawaf, they'll make sa'i, but like I said, they had idols. Sometimes they'll do it with no clothes on. They'll have
they went to the same spots though, and like
yes. They'll do clapping and chanting and singing and a bunch of other kind of weird stuff. If you would have gone there, you wouldn't recognize that as being Hajj. But the areas were still, they understood that Arafah and Mina had significance to it.
That's interesting. Okay.
Because they learned it from Ibrahim alayhi salam, but then, or his son Ismail alayhi salam, then this gets all like messed up and changed, if you will. But some of that relics are still there.
Okay.
It's almost like, bad example once again, almost like Halloween. Like people don't know why the heck they really get going to door for candy. Yeah. But but it was something that was to chase away, people to give them like, hey, I'll give you candy, leave me alone. That was supposed to like chase people away from bad omens, but anyhow, this is showing you how things over time, people just lose why they're even doing it. Yeah. Christmas to extend is almost like that.
The other one was all the way back to like the Islam and Hajj. And I feel like, maybe kind of a common question, but I kind of lost my train of thought there for a second. It had to do with the Samawats, so you said there was 2 opinions on kind of the layers, right, for the different skies. And the first one was kind of how, looking out at like the stars right now, it's the first one, and then there's layers above that.
So whatever we see, that's all 7.
What's the second opinion?
Whatever we look at right now, it's all 7 right now. When you look out there,
it's all 7. So the first is just that the
whatever we see right now.
First one, and then so where are the second?
We can't see it. It's the next one. It'll be another realm.
Gotcha.
Why I say that whatever we look up right now, we see everything, is because of the multiple verses in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says He created 7 samawat. Don't you see any? Do you see any errors or rifts in it? So meaning that, guess what? We must be able to see it then, right? So that's where that opinion comes from. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling us to look at it, so then it must be. Where does 2 and 3, 4, 5 start? Then I don't know.
What do we say? Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Why not just alayhi salam like all the other prophets? Why does Prophet Muhammad get such special treatment? It's like we worship him kind of.
No, I actually definitely have somebody when I say that.
And also how everyone kind of worships the body as well, like the hadiths and stuff. The Quran is preserved by Allah. Hadiths, people say it's preserved the same way that the Quran was preserved, but I heard that it came like 300 years after.
Yeah.
That's actually like a myth, isn't it?
I asked the teacher.
So there's a couple of points there. So number one is so Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam comes from a narration where the Prophet, someone asked, how do we send salams on you? And then he said the one that we see in prayer, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad, kama salli Ibrahim ala Ibrahim, innaka hamidun majid. So that whole Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam comes from that. Because they have the word salah and salam in there. So it's a little bit abrogated and condensed. But instead of saying Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ala Ibrahim wa ala Ibrahim, after every time you hear his name, it's going to be kind of quite long, right? So it got where they're condensing it there. It might be a narration that where it's only that short, but that's where it comes from, though. That one of the points it comes from. And alayhi salam is for the other prophets, even though you might, I have to look at this, brother, because I think there's other narrations where even other prophets, where it's narrated, it's the word sallallahu alaihi wasallam is after their name, like Isa alayhi salam and so forth like that. I'm trying to remember what that is. I'll have to research that.
Is it true that the original shahada is just la ilaha illallah?
No, I mean, to become Muslim, that is what we say, that's the first kalima, that's the first ones there. Okay, you have to deny Allah, that the worship God other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But then accepting the Prophet ﷺ is always the one that Muhammad Rasulullah always was the one that he also said that there.
Was the shape of the Kaaba a circle originally?
No, rectangle.
Oh.
Yeah. Let me go back to the hadith one that you mentioned here, right? So when someone says that the hadith and the Quran are at the same level, they're talking about this term called mutawatir, meaning that there's certain hadith, not all, okay, not many of them, that come from multiple chains of narration. Okay, so if I ask all of you here, did it rain yesterday? You said yes, it rained. And you said yes, it rained. I said, did it rain? All right, and you said you heard it from John, Sally, and whatever. You said you heard it from Muhammad, blah blah blah. And everyone has different chains of narration. So there's no way that you guys can all be lying. If you guys all heard it from each other, then obviously that's one person made a lie and everyone heard it, and that's it. But you have yours from your own narration, and okay, I'm like, it's impossible that everyone here is lying and trying to tell me that it rained yesterday. Okay, so that means mutawatir, that there's so many different chains that it's impossible that it could have been lying. Right? So for example, the Prophet ﷺ ate with his right hand. I heard it from Muhammad, heard it from Farouk, heard it from this person. Okay, what did you hear? The Prophet ate with his right hand. Okay, you heard it from Fatima, Aisha, and Sarah. Okay, how about you? So it's impossible that guys all came together and said, we're going to lie and we're going to say the Prophet ate with his right hand, right? So that's called mutawatir, that it has so many chains of narration, it's impossible. And also that it makes sense that we know in Islam, people get the book in the right hand, right? So he with the right hand also makes sense logically that he would have said that. He didn't with his left hand. So when it comes to the Quran, we'll go into it later on. Well, we're not going to go into in this class, sorry. When Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, after he passed, Prophet passed away, and he collected the Quran, he had someone sit at the door of the masjid, and just a little note, Dr. Siddiqui doesn't have class today if you're here for that, but anyhow, and Zayd bin Thabit listened to people who had verses of the Quran, and he would write it in a book, try to make the first mushaf ever, okay, the first book of the Quran. Everyone had memorized it, and some people had it written on paper, but there's never like one copy of the Quran that we know of. So Abu Bakr was the first to do that. So Zayd bin Thabit, he will sit there and he will listen to people. He memorized the whole Quran himself. And so hear that, okay, you heard Qul Huwallahu Ahad? Okay, good. I know that too. How about you? What did you hear? Qul Huwallahu Ahad and blah, blah, blah. So all those verses of the Quran, like from Surah Maryam and blah, blah, everyone, all came from what? Mutawatir chains. So that's why we said the Quran is authentic, because it wasn't one person said, this is the Quran. And we're like, you're the only one that knows it? No, I don't know, man, right? But it was so many of the Sahaba all saying Qul Huwallahu Ahad, Alif Lam Mim, Dhalikal Kitab, Surah Baqarah, blah, blah, blah. So therefore, it could not been made up. And so terms of narration, we call it mutawatir, that's super authentic. So there's some hadith that are on that level too, okay? Doesn't mean they came from Allah. That's nothing to do about they come from Allah or not come from Allah, right? That's totally different, okay? Yes, the Quran only comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, revealed down to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Hadith came from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we don't use that in worship. You can't read a hadith in salah. I said I recited hadith 754. Right? You can't pray like that. Okay? It's only what you remember that's mentioned in the Quran. But yeah, we said that is preserved because the Prophet said in multiple hadith and also in the Quran that Allah subhanahu says that we have sent down the book and hikmah, wisdom. So what is wisdom now? Allah says we nazal al-Quran and hikmah, and we send down wisdom, if you will. So if Allah says the book and wisdom, they can't be the same thing. It has to be two different things, right? Right? So what is that talking about? Most scholars said that is what we call the sunnah, eating with your right hand, walking into the masjid with your right foot, sleeping on your right side, being good to your parents, doing this, doing that, whatever the case may be. So Allah said that has been sent down. Okay, Prophet obviously was a real person. It was sent down. No one going to not deny that. Now, did he really say like give charity to so-and-so for you? I'm just making up an example, right? Or did he really say eat with your right hand? Did he really say this? Now that goes back to criticism. Where did the hadith come from? Okay, And that could be from various levels, okay? Weak, good, authentic, mutawatir, all these different things there, right? So that is that the scholars, and it's hard to believe because we live in a place where we can't memorize our phone number anymore, okay? So, but back in the day, people would memorize that I know the Prophet ﷺ did this on Saturday and so, and I heard it from Abu Bakr, heard it from Umar, I heard it from this, I heard it from this, and they'll narrate the whole chain to you. You're like, oh shoot, that sounds crazy. Like, how did you know that whole chain, right? And people will memorize hadith like that, and then people would record it. So the Bukhari and Muslim, you know what they would do? They would meet Salim. What is the hadith you heard? Or blah, blah, blah. You heard it from who? Farouk. Okay, hold on, who's Farouk? And they will investigate who Farouk is. Was he Muslim? Where did he live? Well, it found out that Farouk lived in Nebraska and Salim lives in Garden Grove. Pretend there's no technology, okay? So then they'll say that how did Farouk meet Salim and tell him that hadith? That would make no sense. So we're going to reject that hadith, right? Even though we believe Salim is a truthful person and blah, 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 whatever, okay? But there's something wrong in the chain of narration now, because there's no way that Farouk could have traveled all the way to Garden Grove. There was no trains, no planes, and let's say that would be too much of a journey to anyone to take on. So the hadith, and he says, guess what? He says, the Prophet ate with his right hand, for example, right? So logically, we know that's a good hadith. We heard it from other people, but the chain is something wrong with that chain, because there's no way that Farouk would have been able to come all the way to Garden Grove and talk to him. So they're so so meticulous in not just hearing the words, but also looking at the chain of who each person was in that chain. So there's books in, when you get more into Islamic studies, there's a book called Ilm al-Rajal, the knowledge of people. And there's like big books like this where every single narrator, they wrote about where they traveled, who witnessed that they were a good person, did they pray, what were they known for, and the name goes on. So these Bukhari and Muslim and so forth, they knew who these people were. Even though the hadith sounds good, they want to make sure that, is that hadith correct or not? The people that chain of narration is good or not. There's a famous story where Bukhari went to a person to go get a hadith, traveled super far to get hadith from this man. And he saw that the horse wasn't coming, so he pretended to the horse that there was some food, and then there was nothing, just to get the horse to come. And Bukhari said, no, I saw what you did there, so I'm not going to take hadith from you because you could trick me just how you tricked that horse, right? And that's how they lived. So believe me, Bukhari, out of anybody in this room here, wouldn't want to report something about the Prophet ﷺ that he didn't say. God puts Bukhari in what? Hot water. As the Prophet said, that he said in the hadith, whoever lies intentionally against me, let him take his place in the hellfire. All the hadith people who study hadith know the hadith very well. So who in the world would want to say something about Prophet ﷺ that he didn't want to say, or there's like, I don't know, maybe he did. If you don't know very much because whatever, then put in the category as weak. And let people know that, hey, I'm telling you a weak hadith, and it's not at this level, so you know, okay? And so they do a very meticulous study on hadith literature and actually where the things came from. So it's not like, oh, the Prophet said this, and it was like a big game, and people just wrote down in books and, for play. It's not like a brother Khalid. Yeah. Go ahead.
So when you said who in the world would want to do that,
okay, people would.
Right?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people that
100%.
Islam and want to infiltrate it, like twist things.
100%.
But is it true there's more, literally, than 1 million hadith?
No, there's like 500,000, I believe, or a little bit less than that. But it doesn't mean those are all accepted. So you have to think about authentic hadith is like a pyramid. They're very small. And then you have the good ones, and then you have the weak, and then you have fabricated, right? And scholars wrote books about just fabricated hadith that people just made up. And so right? And so they like Imam Ahmed, rahimahullah, very famous story, that he taught his son a bunch of hadith. His son got all happy. I don't know how many hadith there were. It says, son, that you know that every hadith I taught you was fabricated. So know that if you ever hear them, then you know to either chase that person out or, don't listen to them if you want.
How many hadiths Imam Bukhari collected and how many put him in the book?
I believe there's Bukhari. I believe there's 6,000 or something like that around there. I believe there, but
over 90,000.
No. In Sahih Bukhari,
Yeah,
I think
he put him in the booklet about over 9,000 for that.
Oh, and then he took out
He took it out, most of them out, but just put it.
Oh, okay. I have to look up that number, but I mean, in the book itself, it's only around like 6,000 or a little bit more than that, I'm forgetting. But there's a lot of hadith that it's repeated. So he takes one hadith to teach a lesson, use that same hadith in another part of the book to teach another lesson from it, because it talks about certain parts, if you will. I think that I forgot if you take out the repeated numbers, I think that's, I don't know if it's 2,000 or so. I'm not too sure. Look that up. We're super over time, but it was really good questions and so forth like that. And I know it's always hard to hear, like, how do people keep those hadith like that? I just doesn't like I said, so we're coming from a culture that, like I said, we don't memorize much. We just don't. Americans, we don't memorize. We know songs. That's about it. But like back in there, like I said, if you would say something, a poem, everyone will memorize it, and that's how the things work. And oral narration was a very common thing over there, and so it was a much different time and so forth. But that's why they started writing things down, because people started forgetting. So that's why we don't only take any hadith from anybody. These books that we always talk about, Bukhari, Muslim, there's a reason why we always bring up those names, because they were the strictest in terms of their selection of the sayings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yeah. May Allah bless all of you. Inshallah ta'ala, at the end we'll make dua. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Rahman Ya Rahim. Anta salam wa minka salam, tabarakta ya dhul jalali wa ram. Allahumma salli wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we ask you to forgive us for our wrongdoings. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we ask you to help us follow in the steps of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and able to fulfill the sunnah in our life, Ya Rahman Ya Rahim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we ask you for your Jannah, save us from the fire of Jahannam, and enter us into your Jannah in the place of the Prophet sallallahu and within his companionship. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun al mursaleen walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Barakallahu feekum. May Allah bless you. We'll see you guys next Sunday. Once again, it's mentioned there's no Dr. Sadiq does not have a class today if you're here for his class. Welcome, Brother Johan. Take care.
Yeah, Salam alaikum. See you, inshallah, see you in person next week, inshallah. Salam alaikum.